This is the 2025 Volkswagen Taos, and good news, it's fixed our one major issue with it. Of course, there are a variety of improvements for Volkswagen's subcompact SUV this year, so we're going to take it for a drive around San Antonio and let you know all about it. Now, Volkswagen hasn't gotten rid of the 1.5-liter turbo four-cylinder because that's a solid engine. Even on paper, it was down on power, but we liked it because it's torquey and responsive and pretty darn fuel efficient. Well, it has 10% more power this year. That's 16, bringing it to 174 horsepower. Still a little shy of the leaders in the class, but a welcome improvement, and that comes to us courtesy of things like new piston rings and a slightly larger intercooler. Now, unless you're driving them back to back, it's unlikely you're going to notice a difference, but the big change, at least for the all-wheel drive 4Motion models, is that now they have the same 8-speed automatic that the front drive models had before, and that's a big deal, especially in Canada, where the vast majority of Taos sold are the 4Motion models. Without a doubt, when it comes to everyday usage, this is the better transmission for the Taos. It's maybe slightly less responsive than the DSG. If I put my foot to the floor, it takes a little bit longer to kick down, but the trade-off there is way better road manners, especially in stop-and-go traffic or just starting off from a light. It's smoother, it's what more people expect, and it still feels premium in a segment that has its fair share of CVTs. Now, I mentioned CVTs, and this auto does have a CVT-like quality. If you stick it in sport mode, which is available on these 4Motion models, then you are given a lot of rev hang, a lot. The Taos transmission will just hold on to gears for a long period of time in sport mode, and it gets really drony. I recommend just staying in normal. Eco mode, of course, just softens the throttle responses even further, and it becomes, just a little sluggish feeling. Now, here on the highway, there's more wind noise than I remember being in the Taos when we did our big mega comparison earlier this year, but it might just have to do with the higher speeds that are allowed here in Texas versus our home highways. So let's just slow down a little bit, as much as is reasonably safe. Well, it's a little bit better. It picks up a lot over 65 miles per hour. I like the steering in the Taos too. It's pretty light, it doesn't have a whole lot of feedback because that's not the point. But it is sharing a platform with the Golf, which is a great to drive little hatchback, and thus this has the same sort of quick responses and just very consistent character that makes it so easy and predictable to drive. Volkswagen didn't talk any suspension changes because it doesn't really need to. The Taos is one of the comfiest cars in the class. It has a really grown-up feel without being sloppy or feeling larger than it is. It's pretty easy to drive and see out of. That's the thing, it's approachable and friendly. There's still a ton of headroom, and it has one of the most spacious back seats in the class. Not only that, it also has a pretty sizable trunk. No changes here, and that's okay. The Taos was already doing above average in all those categories. Now, what is different are just some of the interior materials. Volkswagen has taken a detailed approach here and just improved some of the touch points in subtle ways. So you have a lot more faux leather in parts of the door. What is important is that this is, really comfy. These are really good seats. They're one of the few in the class that has front seat ventilation, which I can't stress enough is great in the summer. Of course, every model also comes with a digital instrument cluster, and new for 25 is the standard 8-inch touchscreen on all models. Previously, it was only on the mid-model up. Now, it's across the board, although that is a bit of a hit and miss kind of situation because, yeah, it's changed and it has some touch capacitive bits down below it for the climate, and we all know how we feel about Volkswagen and touch capacitive climate controls, but honestly, they're not that bad. They're pretty straightforward to use. Wireless Apple CarPlay is standard and it works very well. I was able to hook up really quickly, and it's pretty easy to get to from elsewhere on the screen, which is not always a guarantee in modern infotainment systems. Now, while Canada sells literally dozens of front-drive Taos, it's a bit more of an even split here in the US, and it's important to note that there are some changes just beyond the additional driven axle. Now, if you get a 4Motion model, you get a drive selector down by the shifter, and that gives you access to not just sport and auto and eco drive modes, but also different mode selectors. You have, for example, off-road setting, you have the normal mode, and then you have snow, and these tell you up in the instrument cluster and change the color of the dials because why not? Alright, let's talk the styling, because the Taos has a little bit more character now. I'm not sure if it's better looking. I do like the full width rear tail lights. Those are cool and modern, and I like that they're not super thin like so many other brands are doing these days. It's a little thicker and chunkier like the Atlas, and there's the light up badge. That's great. It's the front of the Taos that I'm a little unsold on. Now, in person, it does have more ID vibes than it seemed like in photos, and so it has that family resemblance that makes a lot of sense. But there's something about the protruding, contrasting lower grille that I don't know. It just doesn't quite work for me. Maybe it does for you, and that's fine. There are some new wheel designs to round this out, and some new color choices, including a really nice green. Now, the pre-facelift Taos didn't win our mega comparison earlier this year, but it got close, and if you asked Mike or I which one we'd want to take home, this was usually in the running. And that's because the Taos does everything well. It feels more grown up than a lot of options in the class, with better fit and finish in its cabin. It has so much space. And because it has a torquey turbo engine and an actual 8-speed auto, it keeps revs low, and that also just lends to a feeling of, well, more premium nature than some of the other options in the category, like the Honda HR-V or the Toyota Corolla Cross. Of course, the Corolla Cross Hybrid has the advantage of very good fuel economy, which is just not something that you'll find here in the Taos. It's good, don't get me wrong. In fact, for 2025, it has improved by a mile per gallon, or some similar amount in Canadian liters per 100 kilometers. But you're still looking at 28 miles per gallon combined, which is around 8 liters per 100 kilometers, or I'll put the actual number right below right now. In America, the base price of the Taos is up by about $1,000, starting at $26,420 including destination. The good news is that the volume seller SE trim, which adds adaptive front lighting, dual zone auto climate controls, and other goodies, is actually slightly cheaper than before at $29,320. All-wheel drive is another $1,700. The loaded SEL is only available with 4Motion, bringing in at $36,120. Canadian pricing tells a similar tale. The base price moves up a bit, but is the only front driver in the Great White North, because 4Motion accounts for over 95% of sales in Canada. The top Highline 4Motion tallies up to $41,095 Canadian, including destination. Alright, back at the hotel, done driving for the day. And what do I like so much about this new Taos? Well, it fixes our biggest complaints. It has a better transmission for the 4Motion model. That's about all it needed. It also has some nice interior improvements that just make it a better car overall. Oop.